welcome to an event presented by Canadians for Homeopathy. And we are a Canadian nonprofit organization who we've got four foci. We are here to educate Canadians about everything homeopathy, to communicate positive stories and solid, reliable information about homeopathy, and to build community so people can communicate with each other about our favorite topic, and to advocate for homeopathy in Canada and celebrate everything homeopathy in Canada. So you can find us at canadiansforhomeopathy.com, and our email is learn@canadiansforhomeopathy.com if you want to reach out. And we are so happy you're joining us tonight, and that you've made the time for us. We are really excited by this event. So a little more about Canadians for Homeopathy. Our mission is to educate Canadians about the value and appropriate use of homeopathy for the improvement of their health and well-being. Our vision is bringing the health benefits of homeopathy to all Canadians. And our values are personalized, ethical, quality care supported by competent professionals and freedom of choice in healthcare. And tonight we are just feeling really lucky and excited because we have two really amazing Canadians with us to talk all about homeopathy and educate us and get us informed and get us, fired up about a topic that, that is really important for homeopathy in Canada right now. Both Shawn Buckley and Ananda More are leading natural health advocates in this country, they're coming together tonight in a conversation to discuss a new threat to homeopathy in Canada. We're all going to learn all about how Health Canada is implementing fees and regulations that will have far-reaching consequences for practitioners, manufacturers, and consumers of homeopathic medicines. So we're excited to have that be our evening. We're so glad you've joined us. This event is to educate Canadians about current events that may affect homeopathy in Canada. It is for educational purposes only and does not necessarily reflect the views of the organization. Most Canadians who use homeopathy or know anything about it, Ananda needs no introduction. She is a filmmaker and homeopath, and she is the force behind the film and the filmmaker behind the film Magic Pills, which is timeless. It's actually been out for a couple of years now, since I think 2017, Ananda, if I remember correctly, but it is still completely timeless and inspiring and educational, and you will feel so good after you watch it. You'll be so inspired about homeopathy. You can find both the DVD and the streaming version of her film on her website, magicpills.com. And Ananda is starting a new course in January that is pretty exciting. So visit her website to also learn more. It's a pretty exciting offering, and we're thrilled she's here. And we also have with us Shawn Buckley, who is a constitutional lawyer with expertise in the area of drug regulation. In his 29 years of practicing law, Mr. Buckley has defended more natural health companies in court than any other Canadian lawyer. He has an enviable track record in court against Health Canada charges. Outside of court, Shawn Buckley has assisted natural health companies and practitioners navigate and deal with Health Canada. He has attended on a number of occasions as expert witness on the regulation of natural health products in the House of Commons. He has appeared as an expert witness on constitutional law in the Senate, attending as perhaps the only expert witness opposing Bill C-36, the Consumer Product Protection Act. And since 2008, Mr. Buckley has been the president of the Natural Health Products Protection Association, the NHPPA, which is dedicated to protecting health rights with a focus on protecting access to natural health products. He is a founding member and lead counsel for the National Citizens Inquiry. To say he's an expert on tonight's topic is an understatement, and we are thrilled to have you both.
How to start after an introduction like that?
Yeah, I'd like to meet those people, eh?
Exactly. It is an incredible honor to get asked to speak with you. I think you're such a warrior and such a positive voice, and you do such important work. So it is such an honor to be here, and I'm so excited for Canadians for Homeopathy that we get to speak with you, be able to hopefully help us organize better action and change this trajectory that Canada seems to be on right now.
Ananda, it's an honor to be with you, and thank Canadians for Homeopathy for putting this on.
Absolutely. So we were chatting on the phone not too long ago, and got to meet each other a little bit. But maybe you can give us a little bit of an overview as to what's happening right now. What is this bill? Where are we right now in Canada, and why are health products in danger?
Yeah, so I'll just go back a little bit in history. So first of all, I think we need to appreciate how short of a period it's been that we've had access to natural health products and to practitioners like homeopathic doctors. I don't think I even heard of a homeopathic doctor till I was in my 30s. So, in medium-sized cities and below, we didn't really have that. And I'm 58. I don't recall till the late 80s seeing health food stores pop up in malls. And now you can't go to a mall and not find one. So let's understand that it's just been a short period of time that we've really had access to a vibrant natural health product community and the practitioners that have, reemerged after being, shut down since 1910. And so we kind of have a window here, and they're closing the window. So we had moved, I'll just say the drug regulations were never intended for natural health products. So we started introducing novel chemicals into the body, and we learned, oh my gosh, you can't just allow anyone to do that. You actually have to require them to prove that it's safe, and you have to require them to prove that it works. And even then, sometimes manage them with conditions like prescriptions and warnings and things like that. When we came in with the drug regulations, no one was pretending that, ginger tea that we've used for 1,000 years to treat nausea, that all of a sudden we had to prove it was safe or prove that it was effective. That was never the intention. But as these products became popular and as the practitioners became popular, well, now we're getting into market share, aren't we? Now we're actually helping people. And so the regulatory bodies in all of the Western nations, after ignoring these products forever, after not trying to apply the drug regulations to them, started to say, hey, wait a second, the definition of drug is so broad it includes you, and our only regulations are the chemical drug regulations, so you better comply. And there were rebellions. So in the United States, they rebelled in the early 90s, and Congress looked at it and basically passed a law called the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act with three things that we did the opposite. So in the United States, natural health products, although Ananda told me that it might be with the exception of homeopathic products, they're classed as foods. They're deemed by law to be safe, and you don't need government pre-approval to sell them. Well, in Canada, we have a citizen rebellion. Parliament looks at it, but Health Canada ignored basically what Parliament had said, the Standing Committee of Health, and moved us halfway into a drug model. So whereas in the United States, they're foods, in Canada, they're drugs. Whereas in the United States, they're deemed by law to be safe. In Canada, because we're drugs, we're deemed by law to be unsafe, and we have to prove ourselves safe. And whereas in the United States, the same products, you don't need government pre-approval, in Canada, we do. Now, I said we moved halfway into the drug model. Health Canada is now moving us 100% into the drug model. There were three kind of exceptions that we're losing. So first of all, we could use traditional use evidence to prove efficacy. We didn't have to pay fees, and our regulatory burden was lower than the chemical drugs. So what's happening is Health Canada is imposing, it's called the self-care framework. And the word self-care, pay attention to, because what they're actually referring to is they're going to move natural health products. So we're going to lose our natural health product regulations, and we're going to be regulated exactly the same as the chemical over-the-counter drugs, which they're going to rename self-care products. Now, why the word self-care is important is that Health Canada has made it clear that this framework will not apply to any products for which you would seek the advice of a healthcare practitioner. So they really are talking about, you have a headache, and you walk into the drugstore and there's aspirin sitting there and there's white willow bark, and you pick one of them, but you don't go and see a homeopathic doctor. You don't go see a medical doctor. You don't go see a naturopathic doctor. You just make your own decision. It's truly self-care. And they have said, listen, if it's for a condition for which you would seek the advice of a healthcare practitioner, you're not getting licensed under this framework. Well, the only other framework for licensing then is going to be the new drug approval process, and we can't get through. Now, I don't know if we're set up so we can screen share. Oh, just wait. I think I might be able to do it myself. So I just want to show you one slide. So when Health Canada went across the country introducing the self-care framework, you guys can see the title of this is Acceptable Claims for Category 1 and Category 2. So in Category 2 are the most serious claims that they are going to allow under the self-care framework. You read these and tell me which of these is somebody going to need to see you for. Well, maybe some of them, but this is as serious as it gets. Anything other than this type of claim, they are not going to license for. And so the first risk for practitioners is well, if we can't license our natural products for conditions for which you treat people, then what products are you going to use? The next big problem we're going to have is remember I told you we could use traditional use evidence to get through the efficacy requirements. Under the self-care framework, we are not going to be able to use traditional use evidence for efficacy claims, except basically for things like topical creams. Now, I don't know how many natural health products are currently licensed, based on traditional use evidence. I don't think anyone has the answer to that, but I fully expect that it's the vast majority of it. And so right there out of the gate, we've got a huge problem. And then the third problem, remember the second concession was we didn't have to pay the fees. So the chemical drug companies have to pay a fee. So let's say for manufacturing, it's like basically $35,000 a year per building to manufacture. If you're going to package, it's a separate fee. If you're going to label, it's a separate fee. If you're going to apply for a product license, it's a separate fee. If you've managed to get a product license, then you have to pay a yearly fee to continue to sell that product. I was on a call with traditional Chinese practitioners, and I had spoken to one of their main distributors, Eastern Currents, before the call, and they said, we basically sell 1,400 herbs, and the TCM practitioners need access to about 1,400 herbs. He says, there's no way we could pay the yearly licensing fee. We are going out of business if the self-care framework comes in. My understanding from speaking with Ananda earlier is homeopathic doctors need access to way more than 1,400 products. And so you will be in a worse situation than the TCM practitioners that are going to lose their products. And that's assuming you can get through the licensing process. And there's no way that the distributors are going to be able to pay for, let alone go through the licensing process for 1,400 products, let alone more products than that. And the figure Ananda gave me was 8,000. So the cost itself, like it's funny, Standing Committee of Health and, other people in the natural health product community are going, oh, we're worried about the product prices going up. And well, that's fine. Those products that survive, clearly the prices are going to go up when you increase the cost for the distributors and the manufacturers. But I'm more worried about us, even the products existing. And clearly what I think is going to happen is we're going to see a consolidation of manufacturing. Like right now we've got, I don't know about the homeopathic situation, but for other natural health products, we've got a large number of companies that actually manufacture, like they're small and they're medium manufacturers. But I think what's going to happen, just to be able to survive, is that these companies will stop manufacturing and they'll go to some contract manufacturers. So we're going to end up with a couple of large contract manufacturers, basically having the manufacturing expertise for everyone. And it'll be similar to like 20 years ago, we used to have a whole bunch of small abattoirs, and then the federal government forced them all to close. And we have found ourselves with a few large ones. And so it's very easy for them to shut down our meat processing because there's just a couple of pressure points. And we're going to find that will be our situation with natural health products, that if they want to shut us down, all they have to do is shut down a couple of large contract manufacturers. The problem we're going to have is they're going to go into full harmonization. So they are basically going to reduce the regulatory burden for the chemical over-the-counter drugs, which is really interesting when you consider their risk profile. And I can tell you it's about the only time I've ever agreed with the pharmacist associations, because they think this is a really terrible idea. And they're going to harmonize us with these now lowered chemical drug standards, but most companies won't be able to comply. So, I mean, it's already ridiculous. I know I saw Melody as one of the people on this call, and I think she'll recall we were on a Twitter Spaces call a couple of months ago when Brett Hawes, who's a practitioner, was on there. And Brett was saying, you know, I get consulted from Americans and I get consulted from Canadians, and the exact same treatment protocol for Canadians will cost 3 or 4 times as much because our products are now so costly. And that's because we're regulated as drugs, and we already have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops that the Americans don't. But of course, this is all for our safety, isn't it? And I still can't say that with a straight face, because the funny thing is that, like, none of us argue against, hey, let's test for heavy metals and let's test for extreme, you know, microbes and simple things that we can all agree are reasonable. If Health Canada is going to tell us, look at, we basically need to regulate these products out of existence because of, you know, they'll try and point to the odd outlier case where somebody may have gotten hurt. And I actually haven't personally seen a credible case. And about 12 years ago, I did an access to information request of Health Canada. Like, please show me every case where you say that the death was caused by a natural health product, and they couldn't provide a single one. If you're going to basically remove these products to protect us, what's the risk of removing the products? And I fully appreciate I'm preaching to the choir here, but it so frustrates me that, I mean, I know people that are only alive because of natural health products. And I mean, so many people are managing serious health conditions where they're just suffering terribly under the chemical drugs. And to just say that they need to be protected by having their products taken away by overregulation, I'm just truly angers me, because it's just so ridiculous. And the last point, and then Amanda, let's go into a dialogue. But the last thing that they're doing, because remember, we want full harmonization. So up until June 22nd, we didn't have the chemical drug penalties. So let's say you were advertising, because homeopathic doctors, like naturopathic doctors, will advertise, hey, you know, come in and we can treat this. Or manufacturers will advertise. Well, Health Canada has taken the position for a long period of time that you cannot share truthful health information. And we're talking about truthful health information, like lies and fraud. I mean, that's protected under Section 9 of the Act. It's protected under the Criminal Code. It's protected under our telecommunications legislation. You can't lie to the consumer. But that's not what we're referring to. We're actually referring to when you share truthful health information. Health Canada says, no. All you can share is when we approve a product, there's a label claim. And all you're allowed to share is the label claim, nothing else. Now, the label claim is meaningless. Usually it's a structure function claim. And I like to use True Hope as an example, because they have a product called Empower Plus. Some of you will know about it. It's vitamins and minerals. So it's a vitamin and mineral supplement. And it's probably the most effective treatment for serious bipolar disorder in the world. And there are 35 published peer-reviewed journal articles on it. And every single one of those 35 have been funded by governments around the world. And prior to June 22nd, True Hope had links to all of those research articles, the publications, so just links to the journals where they're published on their website, because the maximum fine they were facing for defying Health Canada was $5,000 an offense. But as of June 22nd, the chemical drug penalties now apply to natural health products. And so it's gone up from $5,000 an offense to $5 million for every single day you're in violation. So if you ran an ad for a week that violated the Food and Drug Act, you would be subject to a $5 million a day fine times the 7 days you ran your ad. Oh, it doesn't matter that you're incorporated because the corporate veil doesn't mean anything. Every director, officer, employee who participates in or who even acquiesces in, whatever that means in the criminal court, is also personally liable for these fines. So this truly is the end game. So this self-care framework, if we allow it to be fully implemented, it's partially implemented now. So the $5 million day fines have been implemented. Plus Health Canada has been given broad powers over you that they didn't have before. And Health Canada's published in the Canada Gazette, the cost recovery is coming in. And just so you understand the regulatory process, by law, they have to publish in Canada Gazette 1 their proposal, and then allow for comments, and then all they have to do is publish changes to the regulations in line with what they proposed, and now it's law. So we don't know when that will happen. I fully expect they had published, hey, we're really going for the exact same fees, but politically they'll come back and say, oh, we've listened to all your comments and we're only going to impose a fraction of the fees, let's say 1/8 or something like that. And everyone will go, oh, great, that's a win. But then they'll just jack them up each year. So it's not a win. We can't accept cost recovery at all. And so we have to fight this. So those are the main things that are coming down the pipe. And collectively, they're just going to be a train wreck. And as I say, this is the end game.
So I just see this affecting us in so many ways and on so many levels, like really putting us in a corner where it becomes impossible to practice. Talking about those $5 million fees that you were just mentioning. So for example, if I have on my website what to keep in your first aid kit, and I say, Apis is really great for stings and bites and allergies, that's it, I'm liable, even though I'm not telling people about a specific product that's on the shelf with brand and everything.
Yeah, because you're basically, it doesn't matter, the brand doesn't matter. They're not concerned about that. You're identifying a drug and you're sharing truthful information about that drug, which unless the label claim, unless you're saying exactly what their approved label is for, one of them that is approved, then you're crossing the line if you're offering it for sale. Like if you're not a homeopathic doctor, so your neighbor Bob the plumber just becomes interested in homeopathic medicine and starts publishing truthful health information, but they're not selling, that's fine. So we're only talking about the commercial context. So the Food and Drug Act is meant to govern, commerce. So now that includes giving away products. So, I mean, it's just like, narcotics and that trafficking includes giving. It doesn't have to be consideration. And that's the same with us, our definition of selling under the Food and Drug Act. That you don't have to be given anything if you give the product away, unless you're, fall within sample regulations, you're still then in violation.
So what if, what does that say about education and actually seeing a patient and treating them when they say, hey, I'm here for my arthritis, how can you help me? And
Okay.
We take a case, we give them something. And
No, you're okay. Your question
Okay.
is a very, very good question. And so it's really important for all of the people that are practicing to understand this does not touch the practitioner-patient relationship. Okay, so this is meant to be, commercial advertising, which would include a poster and the waiting room, anything that isn't one-on-one. But they don't have jurisdiction over you when you're with a patient. You're regulated by the province in that context. So this does not affect the doctor-patient relationship. And so you're free to absolutely tell the truth and help patients. And that's really important. So that is, and it doesn't affect schools. It doesn't affect schools teaching. It just affects, selling or advertising products or manufacturing products. So now homeopathic doctors tend not to compound. So I don't think we need to go there. Or do you? Do you guys compound? Well, if you do, we should talk about compounding.
Yeah, I think a lot of us compound, particularly because we don't have access to many of the remedies we need in Canada. So they come from outside, and then we prepare them for our patients. But in Canada, the definition of compounding is even just taking a few like pellets and just dispersing them into another vial and handing that to your patient. That's
Well,
my
actually,
understanding.
it's interesting. We don't have a definition of compound. So when we talk about a compounding exemption in the natural product regulations, we find that in the definition of manufacturer, which doesn't apply to, a doctor preparing a remedy for a specific patient. You won't actually, people will get back to me and go, I can't find the compounding exemption in the regulations. No, there isn't a specific exemption. It's just the definition of manufacturer doesn't cover that.
So what does that mean exactly in the end then?
So what it means is that the parts of the natural product regulations that require you to get a product license for selling a product and having a site license for manufacturing does not apply to a doctor making a specific product tailored to a specific patient, because it's not considered manufacturing under our regulations.
Okay.
So it just means that those parts of the regulations that deal with manufacturing don't apply to a doctor compounding for a patient.
And I'm asking this because there are I've seen a lot of homeopaths here in the participants, and I think we probably all have questions because I think most of us aren't aware of how deep this goes. Like if I have a website that says this is a great remedy for this, I'm not selling my services, I'm not manufacturing, but because I'm a homeopath, I'm assuming I cannot have that information up online.
Well, if you're selling products, no, right? So like this gets great, because most people that are saying a product does something, they're doing it because they're selling it, right? Or they're doing it because they want patients to come in and then receive that treatment, for the condition for which they say it's meaningful. So all of us would consider that advertising then for the purpose of sale. So no, you can't. But the funny part is if you're not offering that treatment and you're not selling that product, then you can, right? So, but obviously as a practitioner, you're only going to be doing that because you want people to come in and access that treatment. And the ironic thing is how are people going to know that you offer a treatment that can help them if you can't stay? Like, do you see the problem here?
Mm-hmm.
And before, most of you didn't care, because if Health Canada, if you came to their attention, I mean, it wasn't going to ruin you to, resist them. And, worst case scenario, you scrub your website for a while. But with these $5 million a day fine, we're kind of hooped. And it actually gets worse, because remember I told you that Health Canada now wants to do cost recovery. So they want the industry to pay for, site licenses for manufacturing and the like, and these product licenses. Well, when they published this in the Canada Gazette saying, well, here's what we're proposing, they actually said, well, we're going to use every dollar we collect to hire more inspectors. And these inspectors are going to do two things. So remember, we're going to increase the regulatory burden. So the inspectors are going to make sure that all these natural product companies are compliant. And the example they use is well, for every product license application, we're going to send an inspector to the manufacturer and inspect their manufacturing facilities, which is just an unheard of escalation. And that's never happened before. Like if I want to manufacture ginger tea, yeah, I've got to comply with, good manufacturing practices, and I will have Health Canada inspector come and inspect my procedures, my GMPs, and my site before I start manufacturing. But then, every time I decide to manufacture a different product, they're not coming and doing it. Oh, no, a site inspection, but now they're going to. And the second thing, so can you imagine the increased cost on the manufacturers and the increased scrutiny? But the second thing they said they were going to do with these inspectors is actually go out and censor it. Because they say, oh, well, there's people advertising beyond the label claim, and we've got to go out there and find these people and shut it down. So they're actually planning on basically using these fees to create an army of inspectors to go and censor us. So it's a brave new world in the area of the level of scrutiny that's going to be on us, because the reality is now they don't have a lot of people actually just monitoring advertising. Sadly, a lot of their activity is reaction based, where a competitor just complains about you to them because the competitor wants to shut you down.
I think in terms of the manufacture or the label claim, sorry, I'm changing the subject a tiny bit there. We had an issue a few years back, and the homeopathic manufacturers, the Homeopathic Pharmaceutical Association stood up and really fought to maintain a few of those claims, particularly like on children's products like cough and cold. And thanks to their efforts, a lot of that stuck around. So like, how do we now differentiate, like you talk about ginger tea, between food and medicine? And like, if you're manufacturing ginger tea for a supermarket with no claims on it, that's totally appropriate and safe. But if you're, as soon as you have a claim on something, is that when it becomes a natural health product?
Yes, because Ananda, we all know that if you have perfectly safe ginger tea, you know, all nicely packaged, and the box says ginger tea, and you know, might say tastes good, that as soon as you put on there, you know, helps alleviate nausea, that those words go and, you know, make the product extremely dangerous for people, and all of a sudden they need to be protected. I mean, the whole thing's ridiculous, isn't it? That's the irony, is they're not going to be sending an inspector to, you know, the food manufacturing plant that's making ginger tea, but my gosh, we better send one to the natural health product manufacturer that would be putting the same ginger into the same, like they'll be ordering from the same suppliers, right down to the tea bags, you know, that it goes into. You know, all of a sudden it's dangerous, and the whole thing's a farce, isn't it? And again, if we don't take into account the danger of removing the products, then the whole thing really becomes crazy. But this isn't about safety. We all know this is about, you know, market share and perhaps control. Like, one thing that troubled me, and I did put in the chat, if the chat's still up, a link to a discussion paper that the NHPPA has up on the self-care framework. And like, it's about 35 pages long, but some parts you can skip over. Like, you probably don't care, you know, about cost recovery or that, but it'll give you the history, and it will, you know, totally tune you in as to what's going on. But there's another discussion paper on the NHPPA site, which I didn't copy the link for, and that talks about, well, where did this self-care framework come from? Because even the timing's interesting. We had, like I say, we were never regulated before. We weren't regulated at all until 2004. So that's when our natural product regulations came into force, was Canada Day 2004. And for those of you who were around back then, you know, it was just absolute chaos. Like, Health Canada didn't know how to regulate natural products. They got flooded with license applications, and they actually had to pass regulations, and then pass more regulations, and then pass more regulations that basically said you don't have to comply, because Health Canada couldn't comply, so they couldn't really go after you, right? For years and years, I bet you it took us about 15 years to come largely into compliance. And let's just back that. So 2004, let's just say it was 12 years before you walked into a health food store and most of the products were licensed. Well, now we're around 2016, and billions of dollars on both sides of the fence, the government side and the natural health product community, to come into compliance. I mean, the whole thing was a train wreck. I mean, our products tripled in price. Many were dumbed down. Like, so what would happen is you'd have a product that worked, and Health Canada would say, oh, you have to drop this ingredient, and these other 5 ingredients, you have to drop the amounts. And I had manufacturers say, I'm not going to continue with the licensing process because the product won't work. But a lot of manufacturers just played ball, and if the person buying it didn't know that they had to ignore the label claim and maybe, you know, add something else, they weren't getting the benefit. But where I was going is, so for almost all of our lives, these products didn't comply. And then as soon as they do comply, in 2017, Health Canada comes out with the self-care framework, and they tour Canada. They go from coast to coast saying, hey, we're imposing this self-care firmware. We've all just spent billions of dollars and a decade and a half getting you to comply with these natural health product regulations. But let's throw those out the window and don't complain to us about it. These are non-negotiable changes. These are actually the words they use. They were non-negotiable changes. And we were told they were non-negotiable because they came from a committee of senior management. So Dean Parks, who is in the natural health product community, didn't access the information request. And he just said, well, who's this non-negotiable committee of senior management? And Health Canada gave 4 names. And these are 4 bureaucrats, none of whom have any expertise in the regulation of these products, but 2 of which have clear ties to international trade negotiations. And then Dean Parks did another access to information request and said, well, what's the basis upon which they have come up with this self-care framework? And Health Canada provided it. I think it was like 88 pages. And so we wrote a discussion paper. It's a 2017 one. But if you go to our site on the search function, type in discussion, you'll get a list of our discussion papers. And you'll find a discussion paper on the origins of the self-care framework. Or actually that discussion paper, I've given you the link to the page where you can get it. It talks about it and has a hyperlink to it. So, but either way you can find it. And we've included all of the 88 pages and you see there's nothing there. So this has come, I think, from basically international move to harmonize how our chemical drugs are regulated and how our natural health products are regulated. So I think this comes from the World Health Organization. They're just not upfront about it. And isn't it interesting that the World Health Organization is, as we speak, now looking into how should we regulate natural health products? I mean, they're using fluffy language like, oh no, we're going to just regulate these appropriately so that we all have access to them. Because we know that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the pharmaceutical companies and that funds the World Health Organization are very friendly to homeopathic doctors and natural health products.
Yeah, they definitely have our best interests in mind. And I love how they use words like harmonize. It's a pretty word. It's such a peaceful word. And yet you feel good when you hear harmonize, don't you? So yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, where is this coming from? I know more about the US and how, the FDA and pharmaceutical companies, the people who run those organizations, they're switching between one and the other, and they go wherever they get the next better paying gig. Do we have something similar happening with Health Canada?
It's less clear. It's less clear just because nobody's tracking it. So, is Health Canada management going into pharmaceutical companies when they retire? Like I know a Health Canada person went to the Canadian Health Food Association afterwards, but is that type of thing happening in the pharmaceutical companies? I don't know. But I think implicit in your question is, basically, are they compromised? So, because if they go into the pharmaceutical companies in the US afterwards, you would think that they're getting rewarded for, a job well done, right? Like, I mean, isn't that the implication? I do fully suspect, largely because of the fact that we don't see balanced risk analyses when they go after natural health products. And because of what Dr. Shiv Chopra had brought to the light, that we are compromised. And for those of you who don't know who Dr. Shiv Chopra was, and I say was because he's deceased now, but he was a Health Canada drug approval scientist for 30 years. And he was ethical and became a whistleblower and forced the Senate to call him and 4 other Health Canada drug approval scientists as witnesses into corruption at Health Canada. And one of those drug approval scientists who is still alive, Dr. Margaret Hayden, had been interviewed by the CBC after she testified. And what she told the CBC was absolutely chilling. Is she said, after you've been a drug approval scientist at Health Canada for a period of time, you come to understand how they are going to get around your decision that a drug should not be approved. Listen to this carefully. So, I mean, here we have a Health Canada drug approval scientist whose job it is to try and figure out, the safety profile, the efficacy profile, and then, should this drug be approved? So she's telling the media, listen, well, after you're a drug approval scientist at Health Canada for a period of time, you just come to understand how they're going to get around your recommendation internally that a drug shouldn't be approved. It's brilliant because nobody's liable. So the management, who Dr. Hayden made clear is never a doctor or scientist. So they don't have expertise themselves. And that's deliberate. It's deliberate so that this process can happen without them being personally liable. This is all really well thought out. So the management that's going to get around the drug approval scientists does not have the expertise to make the decision themselves. So they appoint a panel of outside experts, so experts that don't work for Health Canada. And this panel of outside experts will then recommend, without us knowing who voted yay and nay, so it's just the outside panel recommends approval. So how is any one of them liable? Because you don't even know, did they vote yes or no? It's just the panel is recommending the drug be approved. And then the management, without expertise, just approves the drug. Well, we've got this outside panel recommending it. So how is that manager liable? Because they're just following the recommendation of an outside panel of experts. And you have to appreciate how well thought out that is from a liability perspective.
It's incredible. I think like Canadians tend to have, this is my experience, a lot of trust in their government bodies, and in particularly those that are meant to protect their health. And it's, I think more people need to hear these facts. And I have a lot of people in my life who really who feel that they can't understand why any government regulatory body would have anything but our best interest, our health at heart. And I think this lack of transparency shows us we don't have a democracy really when it comes to how decision making is done in Canada, especially after like seeing how this bill was passed and how it was crafted. In the past, they've always brought in stakeholders to have a say, to have a conversation. And they didn't even give us the illusion of having a choice here or of having a conversation. This was just like over our heads, here you go. It's very dictatorial is what it seems like to me.
It's dirty pool. Just to flesh out the background, like everyone should be mad that clearly Health Canada gamed us here. This $5 million a day fines, and I haven't gone into the penalties or new powers. Like Health Canada's, there's a whole suite of powers that Health Canada has over the chemical drug companies. They actually first introduced these in March of 2008. The legislation was called Bill C-51. And anyone who was practicing back in 2008, they know Bill C-51 because the natural health community just went ballistic. It was such a large citizen rebellion, like the NHPPA, we wrote a discussion paper on it and we just ignited the fire. The Harper government backed down. They never reintroduced it. So they learned it. Like they had introduced Tony Clement, the health minister, introduces Bill C-51. And then Stephen Harper, the prime minister, introduces Bill C-52, this Consumer Product Safety Act. They were sister acts. Like the language was actually identical in many of the sections, the powers, the whole thing, except one applied to food and drugs and the other applied to consumer products. We fought the Food and Drug Act one, and there were 2 elections called, like in short order, and the Harper government reintroduced the Consumer Product Safety Act 2 more times, but they never dared reintroduce Bill C-51, the Food and Drug Act. So, and any civil servant who was working back in 08, you talk to them, they remember Bill C-51. Like it was Health Canada, everyone knows Canadian citizens did not want those powers and penalties applying to natural health products. So now we have a Liberal government, and in 2014, Vanessa's law is introduced by Terrence Young to put stricter penalties and stricter oversight over the chemical drug companies. Well, it's Bill C-51. It's the same powers, the same penalties, but it's just this time they're saying they don't apply to natural health products because they've learned their lesson. So nobody's getting excited about it. In fact, except for the NHPPA, we said, this is a Trojan horse. But we weren't concerned about them applying them to. Listen, a $5 million a day fine is small for Pfizer. It's not big enough. But it will destroy any natural health product company or any practitioner. So it came in, they brought it in under Vanessa's law, but they just created a new category of drugs that it applied to, and that category didn't apply to natural health products. But what happened now this year, so they snuck into the federal budget bill changes to make these powers and penalties apply to natural health products. So whenever the federal government passes a budget, and how big is the budget? Like, is it $1 trillion? Is it 800 billion? We're talking nosebleed amounts of money. Well, often there has to be legislative changes, or there has to be new legislation passed allowing them or creating structures for them to spend money in different areas. So these bills tend to be like long bills. Well, they snuck into there sections 500 to 504, the changes. Well, nobody even noticed. And budget bills pass quickly because, you need the spending. So before so Health Canada, knowing that this was going to get Canadians mad, and that if they actually tried to pass a standalone act again, that there's no way it would happen, they just pulled a fast one on us. So I think actually everyone needs to be quite angry about what happened. We need those sections repealed. NHPPA, we've already drafted a private members bill to get this undone. And we're actually launching a campaign in the next week or so. Can I invite everyone to go to the NHPPA site and subscribe to us? So our website, and I did throw it in the chat, it's nhppa.org. And in there's a contact page, or if you just scroll down to the bottom of our homepage where you can subscribe. If you give us your email address, and we don't send out a lot of emails, only like about 63 a day. I'm just kidding. I don't think it's even weekly. We don't flood you with emails. What we can do then is when we're going to launch a campaign, we let you know. And we update you on what's happening. So it's not onerous. We also have, if you want to volunteer, like we need volunteers. We need people to get involved. Fill out a volunteer form. We are going to be launching in about 2 weeks. We'll have up on our page practitioner kits. So you'll be able to go to our site. But in about 2 weeks, it should be up. You can go to our site and, download a poster for your waiting room and, download our petition, download, order postcards and stuff like that. Like, it would be wonderful, and materials for you to be able to educate your patients, because we have to stop this. We have to create a huge citizen rebellion, and we're trying to empower practitioners to basically use their client base to get involved in these campaigns. And so, I apologize, I'm addressing you today and we don't have that ready yet. But the materials in that are ready. We're just waiting for our web people to set that up. And then we also want to ask, if you've got networks and stuff like that, let's get involved where we can send out communications, right? And then we're also asking people to help support us monthly, like actually subscribe and support us monthly. And we've had bad luck with practitioners. I actually wouldn't mind if we got some feedback from those on this call and the chat when we get the questions and answers. It's kind of like, how does an organization like us, approach you and actually convince you to, donate $50 a month and set it up so it happens monthly? Because, on the one side, like, we're really frustrated. We've had to, we've had to hire staff, postcards, all of this, like, it just, we're bleeding cash. If we succeed, we disband. Like, we don't want to exist. But we're passionate about protecting our access, because this is life and death. Like, it's truly life and death. I don't want to be in a Canada where our only option is chemical pharmaceutical drugs. And we've hunted down practitioners and underground product networks with our $5 million day fines and publicly destroyed people to scare the rest of us into submission. And we've just experienced over the last few years how, fear works in getting us all to submit. And we've just, we're going to pass the deadline in the next 2 weeks, where Canada will lose its sovereignty to the World Health Organization, so that if the World Health Organization declares a pandemic, like they did recently with the monkey flu or whatever it was called, where Canada just ignored it. But next time we can't ignore it. And if we're not doing what the World Health Organization wants us to do, they can actually take control of our health policy, including mandating a vaccine. So we'd even lose our sovereignty over that. I don't want to live in that world. I don't want my kids to live in that world. And I don't have grandkids yet, but I wouldn't want them living in that world. So we're actually at one of those kind of historic crossroads where we actually have to, at personal cost, get involved. We're past the point, because the reality, I've been in this game for decades, and I just get frustrated. I will give a lecture, I'll do a presentation, and we won't get a single person donating. And we won't get a single volunteer out of that. I don't know if I can cross the line and get religious. But I've been on quite a journey with the NCI, the National Citizens Inquiry. So for those of you who aren't aware of that, a group of citizens got together, appointed some independent commissioners, and basically marched across the country, calling witnesses under oath, so all the witnesses called by lawyers, to inquire into how all levels of government dealt with COVID. So literally and 3 days in each city. So we did Truro, Nova Scotia, Toronto, Winnipeg, Saskatoon, Red Deer, Vancouver, Quebec City, and then Ottawa. 305 witnesses all called under oath. And all the world experts like US, French experts, Canadian experts. So you name the name, Dr. McCullough, whatever, we called them. But it was the average Canadians telling their stories. But one thing that happened in that experience, because I was their lead counsel and I called over half of the witnesses, is God kept coming up. Witness after witness, some of the dialogue during the day. Holy Spirit asked me to let him give most of the openings. And we learned we weren't alone. Like, because remember how isolated we felt and how scared? And, as homeopathic doctors and all the likes, I mean, you got a target on your back for whatever reason, but we know the reason. It's because homeopathic medicine is effective. So they have to get rid of it. So you got a target on your back, but we're not alone, and we were never alone. And this fear that we had, we don't have to be afraid. But we can't sit still anymore. If I can share with you a dream that Arthur Pileski had, and Arthur Pileski was one of these pastors that we arrested and jailed in Alberta for like daring actually to hold church during COVID. Like, can you imagine a pastor holding church? Like, what kind of world is this? So he had this dream where there's this fence that just goes as far as the eye can see, and everyone is sitting on the fence. So the whole world, we're all sitting on the fence. And then God's hands come down and grab the fence and he starts shaking. And the problem is we're all going to fall off the fence, but we have to choose which side of the fence we're going to fall on. Are we going to fall on the side that's following God? Are we going to fall on the side that's opposed to God? And at the end of the dream, nobody's left sitting on the fence. Well, I tell you quite truthfully that if you are not 100% involved in resisting what's happening, and not just in the NHP front, but if you're not involved, that's exactly what the enemy of God wants. That's his orders, is just let somebody else do it. Let somebody else do it. That's his orders. So you have to choose. You're now going to be held accountable going forward for what you do. And so if you're not actively involved, whatever that means for you, it doesn't even have to be on the NHP front, but it has to be on this freedom front, because we're in a war. And we're now going to be held accountable going forward. You can't sit on the fence anymore. And if you're not doing anything, you're actively working for the other side. And it's not my dream, but I've been hearing that from source after source after source, the same message, that we're all being called to account. And so it's kind of, when I lecture publicly, I ask people to put up their hands. And I say, and what I'm asking is like, when you were younger, so just listen to this carefully. When you were a child, when you were a young child, you knew you were here for something important. Like, you knew you were here to do something important. And then, we put you in the education system, and many of you went to university and you got married and you had kids. And now, you're driving this kid to soccer practice and this, that, or you're in a busy practice or whatever. And you probably remembered from time to time during your adult life, you would remember going, no, I remember when I was a kid, I believed I was here for something special, but I guess not. I guess I wasn't. Well, you were born for something very special, and it's for right here and right now, because this is a historical turning. And we get to decide which way it turns. And we can't be on the fence. So we get to decide. You're going to be important either way. You're going to be extremely effective for one side or another, but you can't sit on the fence anymore. And so I'm just basically letting you know, you have to choose. You can't sit on the fence.
It makes me think a lot of two things come to mind. One is, I think that parable of they came for the Jews and they didn't speak up. They came for the gypsies and I didn't say anything. They came for the gays, I didn't say anything. And then they came for me and there was no one left to say anything for me. Mm-hmm. And we tried to start an organization a few years ago, similar. I don't know those of you who are familiar with Paula Brown's organization in the States called Americans for Homeopathy Choice. They were able to, as a citizens group of not homeopathic practitioners, but users of homeopathy and people dependent on homeopathy for their health and well-being, who stood up and met with the FDA, went and met with senators, all kinds of government representatives. They got a lot of people involved, a lot of people participating. And when we tried in Canada, it was very, very difficult. Why do you think it's harder for Canadians to stand up and really make a fuss than it is for Americans?
I think that it's just we didn't understand. Did you think we would experience what we just experienced in the last couple of years?
I think I knew this was coming on some level, and I thought I needed to prepare for it. I've been like amassing homeopathic remedies, for example. When Bill C-51 was around, I was very, very worried, and I was quite activated on that in my own community. But a lot of people around me were like, it's going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen. It's going to be fine. And I think that was the overall expectation. And a lot of people I know didn't do anything about it, didn't speak up, because they just thought it was going to be fine. And we were very, very lucky that things didn't go down right there and then, I think. But one is, I don't know how many people are aware of the dangers right now that Canada is facing. And there's censorship, there's, I think a lot of our freedoms are slowly being eroded. And this is a huge one. This is a really, really big one. And not just because I work in the field, but because I see how incapable often allopathic medicine can be, especially when it comes to chronic diseases and illness, and how many people are harmed by those medications. So to me, this is like the absolute entry of a dictatorship. And
Right.
when you can't say what you want to do, how you want to treat your own body, your own sovereignty is being removed from you. And I remember growing up in Canada and being taught about the pillars of democracy, how free speech was so important. And now I have people around me debating whether we should have free speech at all. That to me is a shock. Did you not go to school with me? Did we not see what happened in places like China? Were we not opposed to Russia? And why is it okay now? What has changed? So I find all this very, very difficult. What I do want to say is I have a background in fundraising. I don't know if you have any fundraisers working with you.
Let's talk tomorrow. Okay.
Okay.
So, but can I share that this is exciting? I'll have to share a story so you guys don't think I'm crazy, but this is the best thing that could be happening to us is Health Canada moving to take our natural products away. We should all be right up. The audience shouldn't be able to sit down. They should be so excited that Health Canada is going to take these natural products away. And you go, what the heck is this guy talking about? It's because it's our best opportunity to get Parliament back responsive to the citizen. And let me share a story, something that happened at the NCI. So one of the witnesses I called at the Red Deer hearings, her name is Regina. And she's a political refugee from Poland. She was in the Solidarity movement from its inception. And after so they're getting enough traction. They're holding strikes that the leadership gets arrested. And she didn't get arrested in that first wave, but she's handing out, if you can imagine, like, don't think poorly of her, but she was handing out pamphlets that didn't support the government narrative. And so she gets arrested and sentenced to 3.5 years in jail by a military tribunal. And she served a couple of years of that sentence before she was released and then came to Canada as a political refugee. And ironically, was scared of being arrested in Canada during COVID for handing out pamphlets that didn't support the government narrative. I don't think it came out during her testimony, but when I was interviewing her to prepare her for the stand so that I would know what to ask, she had said, we couldn't get people out on the streets. Like we just couldn't get the masses out onto the streets. And in fact, they didn't come out onto the streets to support us until the bread ran out. And then when the bread ran out, so it's affecting them personally, then they would take to the streets. Many of us on this call witnessed that revolution. They had been a police state for over 40 years. They take to the streets and they peacefully end a police state. Now, on any day during those 40 years, they could have taken to the streets and peacefully ended the police state. Just by, you get a large enough numbers, people just say, no, we won't do this. And they peacefully stop complying. It ended. We're going to experience the same thing until the bread runs out, until it's bad enough that people say, no, I'm not willing to give that up. I'm going to resist peacefully. Well, Ananda, the two largest citizen uprising in my lifetime, and I'm 58, were over access to natural health products. So the mid-1990s rebellion and the Bill C-51 2008 rebellion. And it's because well over 70% of Canadians rely on them. Like when you're talking about managing, chronic health conditions, like you and I both know that chemical pharmaceuticals create the ongoing health conditions, and those they don't create, they definitely don't manage them well at all. Like, you get in a high-speed car wreck and you need your bones put back together, fine. They shine on crisis medicine, but they suck on everything else, and they create illness. So people know this is life and death. And if we all get involved, we can get the largest citizen rebellion in Canadian history together. And it's better than that. It's like we've got all these freedom groups because of COVID, like people are upset and they need a target. Well, what's the issue that we could get Parliament responsive again? This is it. This is what lawyers call a test case. This is the issue we can get more Canadians working towards the same goal than any other issue. And the NHPP end goals are twofold. Like if you look at our site, the first one's broken up in 2 or 3 different ways, but stop regulating us like drugs. Get us out of the chemical drug model. Like really, we want the Charter of Health Freedom enacted, which would create an environment that would end this whole thing. But get us out of the chemical drug model. And the second ask, which you won't see on our site, is get us out of the World Health Organization, because that's where this is coming from. And I'm sorry, Canada doesn't have to hand over its medical sovereignty to some private extra-national group. Like that, we have the expertise to handle our own health crises here. We don't have that as our public goal right now, because we need to get that 70% of Canadians, a large percentage of which don't know anything about wider freedom issues. We have to get them in the NHP fight, and then slowly and truthfully introduce them to the fact, well, the real problem is coming from here, and let's get out of here. It doesn't mean we can't follow the WHO guidelines on anything if they want to. We followed them to a T on COVID. We chose not to for monkeypox, but surely we have the expertise in Canada to decide how we're going to manage things. And I'm not saying I agreed with anything we did with COVID. I mean, I think we had pandemic response plans nationally and for every province based on all of our learned experience, and we did the exact opposite in every case and threw those plans out. And to me, that was absolute madness. And it's not going to lead to good health outcomes, and it's already the most reckless thing we've ever done in our lives. And we're going to see that writ large going forward. But that said, I mean, surely we have the expertise within Canada to make our own decisions. So this whole idea of giving up our sovereignty is just nonsense. So, but let's consider this an opportunity.
I actually maybe we should get the questions going, but I'd love to start it off with my own question. One more question for me, which is, I mean, I've seen in the US, like a lot of lawsuits coming forth. Can we sue the government? And is that a viable avenue? And if so, why hasn't that been done? And what are other avenues? What are other ways we can fight this?
So are we talking about the NHP front?
Yeah, the natural health products. Absolutely. I think it seems unconstitutional and undemocratic how things have been passed, how they're endangering people's lives, how there's censorship involved. It seems to me that there's several grounds on which we could take this to court, but I don't know enough, obviously. I'm not a lawyer.
You see,
about how this works.
It's interesting. I actually don't think the courts are going to solve our problem. I would agree that the federal government, there's an argument to be made that they don't have jurisdiction under a constitution to have this licensing scheme for natural health products. Under the first part of our Constitution, the British North America Act of 1867, Section 91 lists the powers that the federal government has, and Section 92 lists the powers the provinces have. Now, remember, we had two big issues when we drafted our Constitution back then. The first was Lower Canada, which we now call Quebec. Like, how do we craft a constitution where Lower Canada and Upper Canada can live in harmony, in perpetuity? Well, we better give them every power that they could possibly need to protect their French heritage, including allowing them to have a different civil law system. Like, we have the common law in English Canada. They have a civil law system in Quebec. It's a different legal system for their property and civil rights. So the exception would be criminal law. That has to apply nationally. I mean, theft can't be legal in Quebec and illegal in Ontario. You've got to have a common criminal law, but otherwise they're property and civil rights. So we gave the provinces a lot of powers. And the other problem we had is we just saw, civil war in the United States. So we tried to craft things to try and prevent a civil war. The federal government doesn't have any jurisdiction over health. And actually, Section 92 doesn't say, well, the provinces have jurisdiction over health. Courts have just implied it because they have jurisdiction over hospitals, and the provinces have jurisdiction over property and civil rights, which we have interpreted to include managing professions. So, which is why our healthcare professions are all managed provincially. And there's general agreement that the federal government doesn't have jurisdiction over health, which is why they, and it should have never been allowed, but we allow the federal government to basically dictate health policy to the provinces by using money. See, the provinces can only raise taxes directly, but the federal government can raise taxes however they want, directly, indirectly. They have way more taxation power, and their tax base is the entire country. So what Trudeau Sr. did, Pierre Trudeau, when he was prime minister in the early 70s, is he got this brilliant idea. Well, let's overturn our constitution. I'm just going to tax the bejesus out of Canadians and then offer the provinces, hey, I'll give you these wallops of cash for healthcare, but you have to follow the Canada Health Act. We don't have jurisdiction, so we're going to bribe you with money. And we're so far down that rabbit hole in every area that we basically don't have a confederation anymore. We have what's called a unitary state. I kind of digressed a bit. The federal government doesn't have jurisdiction over health. So what's the Food and Drug Act? What's criminal law? It's criminal law power and trade and commerce. So like, let's say we want grade A beef to mean the same thing across Canada. Well, that's trade and commerce. So they can dictate national standards, but otherwise it's criminal law. So we'll all agree, hey, you can prevent against adulteration. That's a criminal law thing. You can prevent fraud. That's a criminal law thing. And because adulteration can also be fraud, it can be deliberate, or it can be undeliberate. But we want what's in the label to say to be accurate, and we don't want anything dangerous in there, because adulteration can also mean dangerous things. And it can also, historically, it's been broad enough to, include things that have gone rancid and the like. So, but we agree they have jurisdiction criminally over adulteration. Well, they also have jurisdiction over really dangerous things. So like I would agree, chemical pharmaceutical drugs used, that they are so risky that, yeah, you can impose a licensing scheme in an effort to mitigate that risk and make sure that products that don't work at all can't be sold. Like if we're going to use them for therapeutic purposes, great, I'll agree with that. And most courts would agree with that. And like controlled drugs like heroin and ecstasy and the like, sure, they're a high enough risk profile. But the reality with natural health products is the entire industry is safer than peanut butter. So peanut butter causes more deaths every year. In a single year in Canada, peanut butter will cause more deaths than likely the entire natural product industry has caused in all of Canadian history. Like it's not even fair to compare the two from a risk analysis. Is peanut butter dangerous enough that the criminal law power is engaged? So could Health Canada set up a peanut butter control board and criminalize peanut butter and, impose $5 million a day fines and, 2 or 3 year jail sentences like we have under the Food and Drug Act for natural health products, over the dangers of peanut butter that isn't adulterated and is, truthfully represented. Like when they say smooth, it's smooth and there's only peanuts and salt in it, type thing. Well, no, we'd all laugh. We'd all say that's ridiculous. That's not it's not dangerous enough for you to engage the criminal law power and encroach in the province's jurisdiction over property and civil rights. So I think there's an argument there that they don't have jurisdiction to create this licensing scheme, to treat them like chemical drugs. Do I think courts are the answer? No, I don't. We'd be spending $1 million and the federal government would drag it out, and 7 or 8 years from now we might get a decision, maybe, kind of. I mean, I know of one court case arguing that the NHP regulations are unconstitutional. I think it's 17 years old now, well over $1 million. It's absolutely destroyed the party that started it. The Department of Justice has a playbook on how to drag things out and make them expensive, so you get exhausted and never actually get a decision. So they basically undermine the rule of law, because the rule of law is government's accountable like everyone else. And if we wanted to have rule of law, the Department of Justice playbook should be, let's admit everything obvious, let's identify what the issues are, and let's get those to trial in an expeditious manner. I've come to believe, watching how the Department of Justice acts, that a Department of Justice is not compatible long-term with a liberal Western democracy. They become the weapon, the government's weapon.
Well, on that note, let us encourage everyone who's here today, everyone who watches this video, to visit the website, make a small donation. Like, those small donations pile up, and they also represent voices. So I think that's really, really important to have there. And it means that you're willing to put a few dollars behind your belief. And that means something.
And pledge month, like it can be set up so that, we just debit your credit card 25 or $50 a month. And one thing that magical has happened is we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of like $25, $50 a month donations. That's how we're surviving. And what's magical about that is that's participation. Like, I can tell you internally, it's so encouraging, it's crazy, right?
Yeah. And also, as a past fundraiser, I do know that gives you stability when you're getting monthly donations, so you know what your budget is going to be in a few months.
Exactly. That's the problem, because we're having to bring in a whole bunch of other people to get things done. Like, if you think we can do this with volunteers, no, we want you to volunteer and we want to mobilize you, but Ananda, it just can't happen without, people committed to making sure tasks are done. So
yeah, absolutely. So shall we open this up to questions?
Let's do that.
Erin, do you want to moderate?
You bet. Thank you so much, you two. This was amazing and enlightening and inspiring and all the things. So thank you. And we have some questions waiting in the Q&A. If we can, if we're going to go to live questions, if the tech end figures that out, let me know. But we'll start with what was in the Q&A, because we've got some good ones here. So, okay. So we have a question. Will Canadians be able to order health products from outside of the country and actually receive them?
So right now, the Food and Drug Act does not prohibit individuals from buying things. So like ginger tea isn't illegal. It's just illegal to sell for a therapeutic purpose unless you're licensed. So Health Canada allows us to import a 3-month supply of whatever we want, providing it's not like you can't import cocaine, but you can import natokinase, for example. Even when Health Canada, had banned natokinase within Canada, you could still, lithium orotate, for example, that's something Health Canada will not approve, although a lot of Canadians, want it. So, but what's happened though is Health Canada plays a game at the border. So when a shipment comes across the border and customs identifies it as a drug, which would include a natural health product or a homeopathic remedy, Health Canada or the Canadian Border Services asks Health Canada, should we let this in? Should we not let it in? And Health Canada plays a game where a lot of stuff that they know they should let in, they turn around. And so shipper after shipper after shipper after shipper in the United States will no longer ship to Canada. Like I know I've personally experienced, avenues that I used to have for products where I don't anymore. I think they're constructively closing that, but technically we can do that unless they change the law. Now, one thing that is changing is that importers, I don't know when it comes into effect, but you're going to have a bank account linked to this digital currency thing. And so is that going to apply to individuals when they bring in the digital currency? They've made it clear that it is for businesses, because if it is, they're going to know about that the shipment, what it relates to, right? So, so I don't know. It's hit and miss. Like I know people will call my law firm that have had shipments turned away, and it's kind of hit and miss.
Another question, what is the expected time frame for this bill 36 to be implemented?
I want to back up a little bit on this importation thing. That's for an individual. Like if you're shipping to a business address and it's more than 3 months supply, they will view it as commercial and turn it around. Unless you have a site license for importing, and unless all those products are licensed. So that only applies. So first of all, Bill C-36, that's not the bill. So that's a different bill. That's the BC bill. So, and we can talk about that too. I'm not an expert about it. We should get someone from BC Rising on the call for that, but I will touch upon it. The federal budget bill was called Bill C-47, and that's already passed. So we have to get that undone. But I spoke about 5 different parts of the self-care framework, and so the cost recovery, it's already been gazetted. Their proposal was to start enforcing that in spring of 2025. They are already working on reducing the chemical drug regulations, and those are going to be the ones that apply to us. So when all of this is enforced, so where we have to comply with the chemical drug regs, and we can no longer use traditional use evidence and all of that, there's not a specific timeline. Health Canada used to publish, they've got web pages on the self-care framework, and they actually have a timeline. They're not following it anymore. So I can't say for sure. I think we have about 1.5 years, 2 years max. It may be shorter than that. So we definitely have to mobilize now, because we've already got the $5 million a day fines, and they're bringing in the cost recovery. So we have to stop the whole self-care framework. But exactly when, it's going to come in, like where, your suppliers are going to have to, be paying licensing fees and get licensed under this new regime, I can't tell you exactly, because they are not telling us publicly. They're just telling us it's coming. And Bill C-36, this tyrannical BC legislation, where, basically they own you if you're a healthcare practitioner in BC, where you can't go against. It would be professional misconduct for you to make recommendations that go against public health recommendations. So let's just talk COVID vaccines. So if you were to recommend that a patient not get a COVID vaccine, that would be professional misconduct, and where they could actually dictate to you as a condition of you practicing that you get the vaccine. So basically, the province of British Columbia has taken everything a step further. And where did that come from? The public wasn't demanding that, but it's been imposed, and you just can't sit still. You don't have a choice. So you have to decide.
Who benefits from sending inspectors with vague agendas to on-site manufacturing facilities? Not the government, not the consumers. Who benefits?
Well, isn't it, if I had a dunce cap, I'd put on my Health Canada cap and say, I mean, really, that's a goading question, isn't it? Because my opinion clearly is we're already over-regulating. We shouldn't be in the chemical drug model. And like I say, I'm not opposed to the common sense things. Like, yeah, let's test herbs and that for heavy metals and excessive microbes and that. Nobody disagrees with the common sense things. But let's not pretend that we Canadians need protection. A theme that they invented for this self-care framework back in 2017, because they know they're going to be challenged on, wait a second, like lightning kills more people than natural health products, is this theme of failed efficacy. So what they're saying is well, if people have access to natural health products for serious health conditions, then they will delay getting the proper treatment. And they actually use that word proper treatment, meaning the chemical drugs or surgical intervention. And they could literally die or have worse health outcomes because they're delaying proper treatment. This is the failed efficacy. It's so Orwellian, it's crazy. So, can you imagine? And, let alone any, freedom issues that maybe people should have the right to decide how they're going to treat themselves or prevent getting sick. Yeah, we're in full George Orwell 1984 when we start hearing things like failed efficacy.
Thank
Our
you.
Department of Justice.
Mm-hmm.
Let's use let's use a tube of Boiron's Rust Tox 30C as an example. So Shawn, I don't know how familiar with homeopathic remedies, but yeah, so that's a one ingredient homeopathic remedy. And the tube has no indications for use. Does Boiron need to do anything to continue selling this product under the self-care framework?
Well, does it have any use other than a natural health product? So you're talking about something that is only used therapeutically and will be sold to practitioners. So
And the public. It's all homeopathics are available over the counter.
Sure. But the problem is it's manufactured. It can be if it's manufactured for a therapeutic purpose, it's a natural health product. It's a drug, regardless of the claims. If it's sold for a therapeutic purpose, it's a drug. If it's represented for a therapeutic purpose, it's a drug. So first of all, how is anyone going to know to take it? And why is it being stocked or sold if it's not for a therapeutic purpose? So so this is our problem, right? We would be doing that just to play a game and pretend that it's not therapeutic, but we all know that it is. And if you were a judge in a court case, would you be fooled? No. And neither would another judge, and neither would Health Canada be. That's the problem, right? It is for a therapeutic purpose, and it's sold for a therapeutic purpose, and it's taken for a therapeutic purpose. That's why I asked if it has some other use, right? Because the difficulty that, homeopathic remedies have is, like ginger tea can be ginger tea just because actually it tastes good, right? So, but homeopathic remedies have no other purpose because they're just so diluted that.
And they already have drug identification numbers on them.
Mm-hmm.
A question here, can mass media in Canada be used to get this information out and set up petition links? Should we be sharing this information with media and politicians?
Is that really a question?
The mass media has really been bought out and is more a mouthpiece for the official narrative. So I don't know what else to say to that. But it makes me think about news outlets like Rebel News that do have a very large following. And I think they would deem this an important topic to cover. So I think there are other alternative media outlets that I think are available to us and definitely require some reaching out to.
My local health food stores, I'm not hearing about this through them. Is there a reason for that? And is there any way to get them more involved?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So I can tell you that at the NHPPA, our experience has been that, when there's a crisis, we get funded. So like Bill C-51, we got funded and had a team in place. And then when there's not a crisis, we don't get funding. So we were in hibernation. And then this came, like I was involved in National Citizen hearings, which didn't finish until the spring. And then, so now we've had to ramp up. So we've actually organized practitioner teams to start what they're working on right now. So we've organized teams of volunteers that are identifying the practitioner networks that we can send our messaging out to. And we also have started volunteer teams to start identifying the stores that we need to approach. So right now, stores that, have asked us for postcards, or that, people have gone and said, hey, you got to get involved in this or that. Like I know I've done that to my local stores. We've sent them postcards because if you contact us, we'll send you postcards, and you can download the petition. We'll let you know what you need. But like I say, we're now making it very easy. So in about 2 weeks, we'll have a practitioner portal for you to get all the materials you need. But the reason why some stores aren't out there is just we haven't organized yet to approach them. Did I say we're asking for volunteers, and we have a volunteer form on our website, and you can set out what your qualifications are and how you want to get involved. And we've had to hire a part-time volunteer coordinator to go through that. And again, we've had to wait till we had funding and then get her in place so that we could organize these volunteers. So it's kind of like again, you got to vote with your wallets, you got to vote with your time, and whether you're supporting us or you get involved in some freedom issue, because your issue might be doing story time in your kid's kindergarten class. Your issue might be, that we're giving COVID-19 vaccines to like pregnant mothers and 6 months. Like, it doesn't matter what your issue is. Support somebody financially with it and get involved. And if you're where you feel you need to get involved is on the NHP front, then volunteer with us and support us financially. But you have to be involved. We're in an information war. They're way more dangerous than bullets and bomb wars, but we're there. We're in a full-blown information war where you can't be silent anymore, and you can't not participate anymore.
Someone writes, I have been an active volunteer to collect Bill 36 postcards to BC MLAs and Bill C-47 postcards and petition sheets for the past few months. So far, our local group has gathered hundreds of postcards. Realistically, is this campaign going to help to force the government to change their position?
I look at it this way. So, like, I play to win, and we've got a whole bunch of other campaigns planned, including basically creating structures in all 338 federal ridings and empowering rational citizens to join all three parties and take control of policy and nomination. Like, we have to get involved in all of our institutions and peacefully get them working for us again. That's the problem. And we are the majority. And if we decide the bread runs out, that's the instant we win. Do I think we can make a difference? Listen, I have MPs calling us now because they're getting. I had a really fun interview with an MP from Alberta probably about 3 weeks ago, where the contact industry, I got to speak to you guys, and then started complaining on how many of these letters and postcards they're getting and how it's interfering with their office. And we need to sustain that. We have to actually just create constant pressure and different pressures in different ways so that they relent. The problem is any government, it doesn't matter who you are, liberal, conservative, you are afraid of Health Canada and you're afraid of the Department of Health because they can destroy you as a minister and they can destroy you as a government. Because we've seen no difference. Listen, after, like when we were, Health Canada was maneuvering us into the NHP regulations, which is a drug style modeling. And we were campaigning against that, not as the NHPPA, but myself and other freedom groups. It's why we formed the NHPPAs. We needed some more formal structure. But I had written a private member's bill that James Lunny of Nanaimo, Alberni introduced. It became known as Bill C-420. He was an Alliance MP at the time. And it got into committee and it was gaining traction, and then elections called. And so we have Colin Carey, who was then Alliance of Oshawa, Ontario. He's still a Conservative MP. He introduces it, and all the parties agree, we'll call it Bill C-420 again, and it's in committee again. And then an election's called. Well, it was part of Harper's election platform to enact Bill C-420. The Natural Health Party community, for the very first time in history, supported the Conservative Party in that election. And then do they enact Bill C-420? No, we get Bill C-51. We learned it doesn't matter. Like, I fully expect that it will be part of the Conservative Party platform to repeal sections 500 to 504 of Bill C-47. I fully expect that. And they might actually even follow through with that. It's low-hanging fruit, but still then the self-care framework marches ahead, and then it doesn't matter. We've lost all our products anyway. And then when we don't exist anymore, it won't even matter. But we have to win. We have to take it back. We don't have a choice. So do I think it'll work? Yeah, I think it will. I think it'll become so desperate that we have to. And it doesn't matter. We're called to fight and resist. We're called so that when you look in the mirror for the last time before you pass over, you're proud of what you see. You're not ashamed.
And we have one last very short question, which is, are the donations to NHPPA tax deductible?
They probably are for practitioners and businesses because you're supporting a group that's trying to protect your business. We're not a charity. We're a federally incorporated nonprofit. You know, if you give us $25 once, please don't ask for a receipt because it'll probably cost us that much to give you a receipt. But you know, if you're a monthly donor or whatever, yeah, absolutely, we can get you a receipt or just use your credit card receipt. But it should be, I'm not an accountant, but I'm a lawyer. If I support the Trial Lawyers Association, which is not my college, it's not my regulatory body, that's tax deductible because they advocate on behalf of lawyers. We're advocating on behalf of practitioners to protect their products. So I expect that you can, but you know, check with your accountant.
Thank you so much. We're just thrilled that we've had this event and this conversation. And I'm just gonna pop this up here and just thank everyone so much for joining, especially huge thank you to Ananda and Shawn for all the time, all the generosity of your time and your expertise. I think people were, the engagement was huge, right? People were chatting away and you know, giving each other good information, and I think this was really important. So Canadians for Homeopathy would like to thank you all for joining us. If you're curious about homeopathy, want to stay informed about our webinars and our events like this one, this is the first event we've had of this variety. And the current situation of homeopathy in Canada, visit us at canadiansforhomeopathy.com or email us at learn@canadiansforhomeopathy.com. Please don't hesitate to subscribe to our newsletter. Again, we don't flood you overly either, mostly with what webinars are coming up. And we are an entirely volunteer-run organization that functions entirely on donations also. So if you want us to keep hosting cool events like this and webinars and keep up our website with a great FAQ section that you can send your friends and family to, all about homeopathy, everything homeopathy, please support us with either a donation or subscribe and join our community for lots of perks, including access to our full library of recorded webinars, which is available to our subscribers. And we do have one other webinar coming up. I think, let's see here, my screen share keeps flubbing up on me, but there we go. We have another webinar in 3 weeks, which is our webinar, part of our free webinar series to educate Canadians all about homeopathy and the use at home and how you can incorporate it into your daily life as a home-based practitioner. Or for yourself and your family. So our next webinar is with Kim Aaliyah. He'll focus on the most common cough remedies used in homeopathy. The essential features of each remedy will be highlighted, and Kim will help us grasp how to know when to use the remedies and bring relief to your loved ones with that. So that's on Monday, December 4th. Look to our social media, our website, or an upcoming newsletter for registration for that. It is free to attend live, as all our informative webinars are. So thank you both so much. Thank you to every single person who attended tonight and showed interest in the situation of homeopathy in Canada and in getting informed, and in our organization and in these two wonderful people's organizations. So thank you so much, and everyone have a lovely evening. Thank you.